Yes. All right. Welcome to Simplicity, the second in a series of Simplify Your Life conversations that I was moved to create recently, just really as an outgrowth of my own changes and the interesting ride of my spiritual journey has taken some very deep and profound changes, turns lately, and I think there's a lot to share here, and I'll just get real with that right now. I'm also going to say that these conversations are also really like everything for me. I'm writing a book right now. It feels very much like my legacy. It is everything that is coming out of me now in these conversations is also being created in other forms as I go. So it feels like a very rich time in my life, and I'm excited to be sharing it as I go. So for me, the part I guess I'll talk about today is connected to why I've invited Linda Pettit to join me today. And that's kind of the frame. I took a class with Linda last year, Life is Spiritual Theater, which was really wonderful. And I was very curious about it because Linda, of the teachers I've worked with over the last few years, was unusual because she actually had a subject matter or a topic for each of the courses, which I don't find very much where my journey is taking me these days. It's much more loose. And in those classes, one of them was about bad acts and bad actors, which for me was a big moment of the depths, to find that I had layers of my understanding beyond which I didn't think change could happen. That I could feel differently ever about certain people in my life, certain bad actors and certain bad things that had happened. If I'm going to use the word bad acts and bad actors, then why not? Because it was pretty shitty. And to soften in that direction at all, for me, is to soften everything. And so, I mean, really, I could just simply say that Simplify Your Life for me is about learning what it's like to move through life in all its absurdity, poignancy, and pain without taking it so goddamn personally, without feeling so put upon and so misunderstood and so victimized and so sorry for myself. So I don't, so I come to these calls not really knowing what there is to talk about. I've invited you to join me for 90 minutes of exploring something so simple that sometimes I just don't even know what to say about it, except to say where I am right in the moment. So, and life has, if I start to think I don't understand this at all, life, believe me, keeps offering me opportunities to see myself. So I have a housemate and I share a house, and I make medicines and I make oils and I make things that are big and messy, and she's gone for a week. So I like to spread out and get my vials and my funnels and my stuff all over the place. And I'm making suppositories and cramp rubs and stuff. And the dishwasher breaks, which I do a little research and find that it has to be taken apart, and my back's in spasms. So bending down to unplug it didn't feel right. So I ignored it, but I kept making the medicine, which was making my kitchen oilier and oilier. Nothing was coming clean. And then I put a jar full of hot oil and beeswax on the counter, and the bottom of the jar broke, and outpoured all this beeswax and oil all over my counter, which immediately solidified. And then I had to clean it up. It's unbelievable. And luckily my back's better today. It motivated me to get on my knees and get that dishwasher running so I could clean up all the stuff that I had coated with oil. And through it, I could feel the little subcommittee voices in my head popping up of going, this is too much, I can't take it, and I have a call, and how will I settle down? And I'll have to pretend I'm okay, and things are too chaotic, and those voices were doing their thing, and I just kept tearing paper towels off the roll and scrubbing, and so anyhow, it was chaotic and complicated and really simple. And there's some sweetness there for me too, because sweet in a poignant way, because I have spent a lot of my minutes of my life ruining the moment I was in. And this is an opening I'm finding to enjoy the moments I'm in more. Anyway, Linda, I know you're not feeling well, but I was wondering if you'd like to chime in a little bit with your blowing your nose as we go.
Yeah, I might have to do that.
And join in.
Well, I think that was a great way to open this. And first of all, Sue, I want to let you know that I think that the title and the focus is brilliant, simplicity. And the play on words with tea, I was thinking that that's one of the things in my life that I've really loved, is just being able to sit down most often with a woman friend or my sister or a group of women over a cup of tea. And I'm a big tea drinker because my family is actually from Poland, and Polish people love their tea, so that was passed on from all of my grandparents. So I actually earlier today had my tea with my world's best Grammy mug, and so to just think of this as an opportunity to sit down with some tea with some lovely women is really a sweet thing. And I think just tapping into the sweetness and simplicity of that is brilliant. I was thinking as you were sharing your discussion that when I first began to do coaching, this was moons ago, many moons ago, before I came to this understanding that called the 3 principles that I now share solely, that I had a website and a business called Wisdom Sources, because I really saw that wisdom was in everybody, that I'd been doing psychotherapy for over 20 years, and I would get taken to my knees every day with the breathtaking wisdom that I would see in people who were traveling through sometimes really difficult experiences. And I could always find it. It was never absent. And that was kind of astonishing to me. And then I, along the way, my first husband died in an automobile accident. So it was a sudden bereavement. And I, like most people who are going through something like that you don't expect, it sort of turns life up on its end. And there are a lot of people talk about how often during an experience like that, you kind of go off in the wilderness. You don't really know where you are, who you are, where you're going, but you know that whatever you were before is no longer, it's just no longer what it was. And that was a really rich time of my life. And during that time, I stumbled across a book called The 12 Secrets of Highly Creative Women by Gail McMeekin.
Oh, I know Gail. Wow.
Yes, as do I. And actually, she was the first coach I ever had. She coached me for quite a long time. And Gail, reading her book, I said to her, I called her because we'd been coaching for a while, and I said, Gail, would you ever mind if I ran a creativity group for women called The 12 Secrets of Highly Creative Women? We would just meet once a week to discuss one of the chapters. So it's kind of like a book club. Would you be okay with that? And she was really sweet. She said, absolutely. I mean, yeah, great. And so I did that. I put a little thing out there, and I don't know, 8 women showed up, and we talked about each of the chapters in the book. And then I did it again, and then I did it again, and then I did it again. And more women started showing up. And at some point, Gail said to me, you've learned a lot from this process of sharing with women about creativity. What about if you created your own program, not a program based on my book? And so I did. I created my own program and birthed a website called Embrace Your Creative Spirit. But the thing that was so amazing to me as I think back on that is a lot of the women who were coming into that program were therapy clients who were looking to continue their work with me, but not necessarily in therapy. Or I was referring them into this group kind of as an adjunct to the work they were doing with me. And something really beautiful was happening. That as people stopped focusing on their problems, but instead started focusing on embracing their creativity, really amazing things were happening. People were recovering from depression. People were moving past anxiety. People were moving past stuckness. There was one woman in the group who had, disguised this a little bit to protect her confidentiality, but she had been diagnosed with a chronic illness that was making the life's expression of creativity, the way she had always loved to do it, impossible. And through that group experience, she found the creative writer in herself, and dictating was something she could do. And she ended up writing several books for people who were grappling with the same chronic illness that she was grappling with. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. She wrote beautiful poetry and beautiful books that helped people. And I was really struck by that when people stopped focusing on their problems, stopped focusing on what was wrong with them, stopped focusing on what was wrong with life, but really began this exploration of what is creativity and what does that mean to me, that really, really beautiful things were happening. And now, and I was guided to name the website Embrace Your Creative Spirit. It's no longer up, so you can't find it. I took it down years ago. But I was really touched by that, and I was really curious about that. What's happening there? How is it that without focusing on problems, people are getting so much better? And along the way, I stumbled, and it was sort of a stumbling in that I met my current husband, another love of my life, Bill Pettit, who has been sharing the 3 principles understanding for over 30 years, and began to learn about the 3 principles understanding. And it's really very simple, but I saw that it explained what was happening in my creativity groups. Beautiful.
So for anyone who might be on the call or see this video who doesn't know what the 3 principles understanding is, what is it about that you saw light people up or let them get around what they were seeing as their obstacles when they were in their creativity?
Well, what it pointed me toward was to see that the principles, which are mind, thought, and consciousness, are like paintbrushes that we have in our hands to create life, to create our psychological experience of life. And what I saw was that none of us have any control over what happens around us in life. My husband had an accident and died. My daughter had a car accident, a very serious car accident, a couple years later, and I, had to figure out how to navigate through that scary experience. I fell off a ladder and wrecked my body. It took 3 years to put me back together, and I had to figure out how to navigate through that experience. So to see that that there were three common denominators that I was using and all people were using, every single person was using to create an experience of life. Showed me what was happening behind what I had experienced in those creativity groups, that literally people were suddenly, in a way that was harmonious with the nature of the three principles, using them in a way that was wise and not foolish. So the principles are mind, thought, and consciousness, and mind points to who we are, what we're made of, a spiritual intelligence. Spiritual meaning just formless. A lot of people, when they hear the word spiritual, their ears will perk up and they kind of want to put their hands over their ears, because for them it means, oh my God, they're going to be talking about religion. And there are a lot of us out there today who have a certain amount of distress about some of the things we've experienced in religion. It wasn't meant for that to be, but it happens. But spiritual points to the truth behind dogmas and religions, points to that incredibly beautiful essence, the indwelling voice, the indwelling spirit that we are made of. And it's formless. It has no form. So I remember when my father-in-law died, I loved him dearly. And at the moment of his death, it felt to me in that room with him and his siblings that a beautiful energy swept through me and then left. I mean, I felt it. I just felt it viscerally, this magnificent, big, unlimited surge that just swept up in and out of the room. What was left behind was a body. It looked a lot like my father-in-law, and it still had my father-in-law's heart in it, and it still had my father-in-law's liver in it, and it still had his hands and his feet and his hair, but it wasn't him. The essence of who he was gone. And so that mind points to that beautiful energy. And I think that energy is pure love, and I think that energy is pure creativity, and I think that energy is pure unlimited power, and it's who we are. And it takes form in our body. And via thought, we use that energy to create our experience of life from the moment we're born, near as I can tell. It's been fascinating because I have a 2-year-old grandson and a 3-week-old grandson. And to watch, especially the 3-week-old, his eyes are starting to be open more often, and he's just gazing at the world. He's conscious. That's the gift of consciousness. I am pretty certain that he still knows a little bit about where he came from, and that he's also observing the physical world. And as he's doing that, he's thinking about it. And no two individuals do that the same way. We all think differently because we're having different experiences and we're seeing different things. But moment by moment, from the time we're born, we're thinking. And we develop habitual ways of thinking, and that creates our personalities, and that creates our preferences, and that creates the thing that we call our identity. But that's not really who we are. There is this beautiful spiritual essence that is pure behind all of that. But we get to use it. We get to use it as a paintbrush to see life in our own highly unique, highly individual way. So the gift of consciousness is our ability to notice life, to notice our thinking, and the gift of thought, all of us know what thought is. It's what we use to navigate this beautiful world. And there are no conditions on it, but it is a manifestation of mind. Every time we have a thought, it's a form that mind has taken.
I really like the paintbrushes. For me, that feels, and I've heard you, and I've read books about this, including the book Sid Banks wrote about mind, consciousness, and thought. But when it becomes something that I can really feel, when it becomes something like a visceral image, like a paintbrush, that's something I can really hold on to, because for me, I think I said the thing about the frame through which I see life earlier on. And in my career as a coach, and my career as a coaching client and a student, I've been offered that image a lot of change the frame that you see, that you look through, change the frame. But yes, and yes, I continue to do that, but frames have edges, right? So I can change my frame, but I still hit the edges of what I understand and what I have made peace with, and then I still hit up against those edges. So how do I wield my paintbrush then? And when you were talking, I just had this image of the paintbrush being like an erasing paintbrush, like in Photoshop, where you just dissolve the edges of the frame. I kind of love that idea of soften them, make it permeable, because my first SimpliciTea guest was Molly Gordon, and she's been my coach a lot for years, on and off. And I've had many coaching sessions with Molly where I would come with whatever catastrophe I was looking at that day, and what if this or what if that, and I would get a variety of oh well responses from Molly. Oh well. Oh well. And I've had this image, which I confessed to her, of the Owelometer, I'm calling it now, the Owelometer, which is like this little needle meter that has a green zone, a yellow zone, and a red zone. And the green zone is the stuff that comes, like the dishwasher breaking, and it's like, oh well, I'll deal with it. Oh well, in my stride, maybe slow me down a little bit, but I'll deal with it. That's the green zone. The yellow zone is, I'm going to have to really think about this, because I wasn't planning on looking at this. I don't want to have to really clean all this oil and beeswax off my counter right now. I don't want to. It makes me feel like I'm a loser. But okay, I've gotten through stuff like this before. I can get over to the green on this one. But the red is like there are just some catastrophes that I know I won't survive, like homelessness, or a physical diagnosis of X, or a car accident of whatever. There are things that will be too catastrophic and too big, and they're in the red zone. And I don't want to have to even think how I would get through that, because I wouldn't. But the paintbrush is working on the borders of those, the hard lines between those zones even as well. I'm finding I had this thought come to me the other day of, well, shit, if I get to be homeless, I'll probably move through that too. And I never thought that before. I've never thought that competency could even apply. It would just be too much. It would not. I could not. But the would nots and the could nots and the I can'ts and the how dare life do this to me, they're just softening. They're not, it's not like I have to change the frame anymore. I don't have to take the frame so seriously. I don't know. What do you think?
I never thought about that before, Sue, but it's a great, the metaphor you're pointing to me is really beautiful, that, you know, and it fits my experience. I love that Joseph Campbell, the guy who wrote The Power of Myth and is well known for his interviews with, I can't remember the name of the guy who about the power of myth. He said at one point, why would I need faith when I have experience? And your comments reminded me of lots of people that I've known, just like a whole flow went through my head. Like the woman I talked about who got a chronic illness that made it impossible for her to function as a musician, who get confronted with stuff like that, with frames, and then they blow the edges off the frame. my dad was a very strong individual, physically and mentally and characterologically. He had just a really strong personality, and he was brilliant. He was just a brilliant man. And I remember when he got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, thinking, "Oh my God, how is he going to manage this? How is this person who has prided himself on his competence going to manage this illness that's going to rob him of so many of his physical and potentially mental faculties," which it did. But he moved through that with an uncommon grace. He was beautiful. And my memories of the last years of his life are of this man who was softer and sweeter and had the most brilliant smile and just loved the little things in life and appreciated even though his world shrank to by so many degrees, what was left was appreciation of what was, not what wasn't. And gosh, I see those kinds of things all around me. I remember not too long ago having a colleague who had a nephew who lost his foot in a lawnmower accident. And this little boy just lived into this beautiful life with this new limitation. And that happens around us all the time, doesn't it? But there's a secret to that.
I want to hear what you think the secret is, because I think I have one too. Go ahead.
Well, the secret is that we are unlimited capacity, to me. The secret is that we are an intelligent energy that knows no limits. The secret is that mind will guide us, and through us, it is us, through anything and everything, and will support us in using our paintbrush to create beauty, irregardless of the circumstances we're given to go through. I remember after my husband's death, a moment where I was really pissed off at him, and I was having to move wood from a wood bin in one location to the house. He used to do that, and it was quite a distance because I was living in West Virginia, and a smart West Virginian does not put a wood bin close to the house because wood bins attract copperhead snakes.
Oh.
You want to keep those things as far as possible from the house. So I was having to move this wood, and I was really ticked, like screaming at him, angry. How dare you leave me? How come I have to be the one stuck here doing this as I slogged through 20 inches of snow trying to move these pieces of wood? And then my vision got distracted to his bird feeders. And I was just standing there for a moment in this wilderness, because I lived in the wilderness with no visible neighbors, looking at the bird feeders thinking, thank God I met Jim. Thank God he taught me how to watch birds. Thank God he taught me to be present to nature. And I realized in a heartbeat that my experience of life went from grief and anger to gratitude and pleasure, like that. But then I had this thought, oh, I'm a bad widow. That's not supposed to be what grieving widows do. Grieving widows aren't supposed to experience happiness, and there must be something wrong with me. Well, I think in that moment, I blew the edges. I blew the frame off. Because the next thought was, that's crazy. I am honoring his life much, much more with my happiness and gratitude for what he gave me than I am being sad and upset. That's crazy. That doesn't give homage and witness to what he was in my life. And I think that's what you're pointing to. It's like there are moments that creative spirit that we are, if we let it, puts a paintbrush in our hand that allows us to blow the frames off everything and create on an unlimited canvas a life that we can be proud of.
I'm sorry, what was that last part?
Create a life that we can be proud of, that we take pleasure in, that is a testimony to the bigness of the spirit that we are.
somebody, and I don't know if it was Michael Neal or you, I don't know, I think it might have been Michael Neal, once said something about separating what's happening from what we think about what's happening. Like they're separate. They don't have to be tied together.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this all came about in the beginning of this year, and also at the beginning of this year, I had a particularly bad time of it with my physical body. I went into a spasm that moved around but stayed with me for about 6 or 7 weeks, where moving was limited, pain was up high, I was taking more meds than usual, I was really having a tough time of it. And in the middle of that, I signed up for an 8-week beginning yoga class. I don't know why. I knew it was going to take me a long time to get down to the mat, let alone back up again. I didn't know why, except I had this feeling that some opening might become available to me that I haven't been able to find myself in all the doing and the treatment and the body work and the patches and the salves and maybe something would come to me. And so I signed up for this yoga class and spent most of the time on the mat, slept through the first half of the class. And when I came to consciousness again, this thought came to me that sensations and processes in my body don't have to be the boss of me. They don't have to be the boss of my sense of well-being or my state of mind. And that might be this thing that I think somebody once told me, that these things are separate and that sensations and processes, if I live to be older, are just going to keep happening. Physical and financial and relational and all of that stuff is just going to keep happening in my life. And it's the quality, right? I'd much rather see a bright picture than a dark one. I'm really tired of painting a dark picture. I'm very good at it, but it no longer has the glamour it just doesn't work for me anymore. And I'm not getting any mileage out of it. So what's left? And I just want to say this and then also invite Terry and Margaret. Margaret, if you have a camera, please turn it on so we can see your beautiful face. You can join in the conversation, raise your hand, or just unmute yourself. But I've been, oh, hi. I've been scratching my head about this insanity of me. I booked a whole 7 weeks of live and online calls. And my back went out again on Friday. I spent Friday and Saturday and Sunday in deep rest going, what have I done? I don't even know if I'm going to get to the place I had a live event last night. But it felt really messy until I thought about it. And I would much rather have these on the calendar, even if I can't show up to one of them, than not have put it on the calendar at all. So who wants to jump in?
Well,
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Margaret.
Hi.
I don't know if we've met. Nice to meet you, Margaret.
I was taking the course with you with CTI.
Oh, hi.
Hi. That's how I found out about your Simplicity series. And I really enjoyed your interview with both of you. I enjoy hearing both of you. I think you're both very inspiring. And I guess like when I took this course with the CTI, I said to myself, oh my God, all these people are so inspirational and they're creating all these impossible things. And the only thing I could create was, my Passover, that I actually enjoyed it the first time in many years. For me, that was big. But, I said to myself, my God, but all these people were creating, you should see, like, Sue, you were creating the Simplicity series. And, I don't even remember all the stuff people were creating. It was like unbelievable. And And now suddenly I became sparked again. Like I'm very into education. And, but I had a lot of failures in my past, you know? So if I go back to the past and think about how much I failed, then I could just sabotage myself and never try, you know? And I guess after this, what ended up happening, I became very inspired and I decided, you know what? I am good. First I wanted to, I started with wanting to start, I always wanted a school, a school and a girls' school. I wanted it really for my grandchildren. I wanted them to learn I wanted to be a religious Jewish school because they have lots of not Jewish schools, but they don't have, like in Emilia Reggio here in New Jersey, they have one young Israel type Jewish school in Deal, New Jersey, which is not like here in Lakewood. And I have 6 grandchildren. I'd love them to be exposed to that kind of thing. And so I said, you know what, I'm not going to start with 6th grade. I'll just start with the youngest, which is 2 years old, 1 grade, 5 kids, you know, and I'm not going to look at the past and think about how much I failed in the past, but how much I did learn and what I did get done and build on that. And so, you know, I could just identify with all the things that you were all saying about, like, you know, well, Michael Neal talks about when you're trying to do this new project that you get to gasp, grin, and giggle. And I thought that would never happen to me. Because, you know, according to me, my life was terrible. And as much as I understood the 3 principles, I said, come on, I need to get my ducks in order. You know, my husband is in debt. My son is in contempt of court. Come on, you know, God, you really can't do this to me. Here I am, this Jewish person. And I'm like angry at God, really. You know, I'm telling him, listen, you got to get my ducks in order. My son's wife died already 3 years ago. I mean, come on, can't you stop this insanity? Why should he have to run away from his bloody in-laws because they're harassing him and making his life miserable? You could just, you know, just take care of it. I mean, God, you're powerful. You know, you can get rid of the contempt of court, let him come back so that, you know, I had all my ducks. You know, I had all these requests that I had for God.
Let me just
I'm sorry.
I was just going to ask you how simplicity can help the way you're looking at this.
Well, it's helping me a lot because, you know, basically it's making me really believe that it's not the situation that's causing it. It's really my thinking. Because why is it that suddenly now I'm inspired of opening up? My grandchildren are still not here in Lakewood. My son is still in contempt of court. My husband is still in debt. And here I am excited about opening this school. I mean, it's not a school. It's going to start with 2-year-olds. It's just going to be a preschool with 5 children. Okay. But I'm actually excited about it. So I'm saying, like, you know, talking about creating a impossible project, you know, well.
I totally relate that this thing is still happening, and this thing is still happening, and this thing is still happening, and you're following your spark. And I venture to say that, I don't know, people say it so eloquently now I can't even put the words together. The way I look at what's going on changes the picture that I see. I swear to God. And that sounds like law of attraction, and it so is not. It is so not. But when I'm pissed off at what's happening, things feel more brittle. And when I don't know, when I have just a glimmer of an eyelash of a modicum of gratitude in my back pocket, in any moment, even when I'm covered in beeswax, life is tolerable, or even better than tolerable. Hey, Terry, what's up with you?
I was really enjoying and appreciating what you were talking about, Linda, with your creativity groups. And for the CTI project I had was a program called Unreasonable Creativity with the subtitle of Exploring Art for No Good Reason. which now I've come to realize may not be the best subtitle. So I'm rethinking that. But I launched this program, but I launched this program after a trip I took to California, in which I went to the Three Principles Conference in LA. Were you there?
No, I was home helping a new baby get born.
But Bill was there.
Yes, he was.
Saw Bill talking. And when I got back from that trip, everything in my consciousness was it was in this turmoil about why I'd even created this program. Like I couldn't even access the point of it. And I was just batting back and forth, but I went ahead and launched it anyway. And just kind of was doing this fake it till you make it, kind of realizing, even though I was caught in this confusion of what am I doing? I'm not ready. I can just listen to wisdom and allow it to unfold and it'll be fine. I don't have to worry about it. Of course, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's all great because it's not coming from me. It's coming from something bigger. But then I'd be caught in this wrestling match with whether to go for it. The whole time, even though I wasn't experiencing my innate well-being and my knowing that all was well, I knew that would dawn on my mind again. Because that is our resting state. That is who we are. And it was only an intellectual understanding because I was mired in the experience of the thoughts that were going through at the moment. I ultimately decided because I had 3 signups, 2 of which couldn't make any of the calls, and the program was primarily live calls. I decided I would reformat, put the program on hold and reformat, retool it, do all this different stuff to it and I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm open to it. So I'm very grateful for hearing about your exploration in this creativity, because I call it innate well-being, innate creativity. It's all the same thing. Mm-hmm. And how that unfolded for you, because it's true. I mean, it unfolded without any knowledge about the 3 principles. It was a natural response in life. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really curious about that. And I'm curious about how presenting this understanding in a way that's reachable for people who may or may not be able to hear it from a 3 principles perspective, although that would be ultimately where I could point. But in order to have the conversation in a way that's asking them what is important to them and what they're interested in, and engaging people on that level and talking from that space, and then allowing whatever's supposed to come next, from wisdom to guide that interaction, is what that just lights me up. That makes me gasp, grin, giggle. So I really appreciate hearing about that program that you had, and seeing how this conversation keeps unfolding with you, Sue, around the simplicity.
Well, yeah, tender stuff for me, because here I am doing these calls, and they're free. I'm not charging anything for it. And often when I go to accept invitations to calls like this, 8 out of 10 times people are offering something on the call. They're offering a paid program or a something to sign up for. I don't have that. I don't know what I'm offering. I don't know what this is pointing to. I think it might be pointing to something. I think it might be a small group, but I have managed to fail to launch so many things over the last few years, so many different small groups. Reclaim Your Resilience was one of them. And I can't even remember the name of all of them that I have tried to bring to life, and not done a very good job of it. And now I feel like my motivation is very much to be in the conversation, is very much to be in the conversation, to very much continue to see if I do have a book here. I feel like I do. I feel like I'm halfway there. and to continue to develop this content. But it's really putting myself out there like this is really, I think maybe these calls should just be a support group for gals who do this kind of thing, because it's hard. You know, it's hard. I went last night to my synagogue, said, sure, come use the space. And I publicized about it on, you know, Facebook, and I made flyers, and I went all over town and I put up my flyers. Nobody came. Nobody came to the one last week either. And, you know, I know how to be discouraged. I know how to give up stuff. I don't know how to just show up and follow that thing, Terry, the wisdom, the inspiration, the creative, just knowing that this is an important conversation. And that the rest of it, you know, the how and the what and the how much, isn't as important as it used to be when I was trying to point toward creating some kind of thing that would not only help other people, but be good for the revenue of my business. Yeah, so it's interesting, and I think this is also talking about simplify your life. When people are coming to me now for coaching, I'm not even thinking about selling them a package or sign up for 6 months or make a commitment. I'm like, here's my scheduler, book me when you need me. I'll give you a payment link at the end of the call. I'm here. You know, that's just where I'm sitting with it right now. And that's probably really bad for business, but all that other stuff I did never really helped my business either.
I was seeing the, go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. First of all, you did a big thing, because I never, ever, ever unmute myself for talk on a recording. I mean, the fact that I can't believe that I had the I don't know. I don't know what happened to me, that I was able to talk and say what I did was big, you know. I don't do that. I don't talk in public, you know. I might say something and it's going to ruin my life for the rest of my life, and I'm going to go back and you know, who knows what the consequences will be for this. And here I am, and I unmuted myself, and it was your series here, you know. I have to say, I mean, you know, one of the things is I was really excited about hearing Linda speak. I have to say, Linda, I did hear you speak in other, you know, I've heard you speak about your experiences when you married your husband, and, you know, what you went through, and until you finally, you know, accepted the 3 principles. And I was very inspired with you. So I was very excited to hear you speak. You know? And Sue, I was excited with you also, because you went through so much with your physical stuff, and yet look at you. You look wonderful. You look like you don't suffer at all. So I can really identify with you, because I could tell you about all my failures, really. And yet I just feel so grounded right now, you know, with all the stuff happening in my life. I feel like I already am starting my school. It didn't even start. I don't even have my 5 kids, you know. It was just on Passover. You know, I was having this whole conversation with God. Okay. I talk to God a lot. Okay. I was supposed to pick up my husband from synagogue. Okay. And I told God, listen, I gave you an ultimatum. I mean, this is not what you do with God. Okay. But I did it with him. I was already fed up. 3 years. My son is going through so much in this time. You're not doing anything. You got to shake a leg and do something. Show me something. I need some movement. Okay. Okay, God, I really need movement. So anyway, it's really funny. And I had this whole view about how I had these 6 rooms in my house. I was going to turn each room into another class for my grandchildren. I told you I had 6 grandchildren. And then I decided, well, it's too much. Maybe I just, you know, just focus on these 2-year-olds. Okay. And so it's 11:15. Okay. It's on Passover. I'm supposed to go pick my husband up from the synagogue. I go out of my house and I see a friend with her husband and child walking. And I say hello, and I tell her, listen, I'll walk you to the synagogue. There's a synagogue in our development. And then I'm just telling you, I'm going to go pick my husband up. He went to whatever. So I walk her. Okay. We meet this beautiful girl, married with 2 children. and she's a real estate agent. And, you know, so my friend goes down to the synagogue, and then I walk over to this real estate agent and I tell her, listen, you know, I can't believe I'm saying this on a recording. But anyway, I said to her, listen, I would like to turn my house into a school. Since you're in real estate, do you think that they would give me that permission? You know what she says to me? And she says, what kind of school? And I said, you know, I'm very into Amelia Reggio. It's like the Cadillac of hands-on learning. And this is my dream. I want to finally have, you know, I didn't say I wanted for my grandchildren, right? And she says to me, oh, you know, I have a kid who's going to be 19 months in September. Could he be in your school? Okay, I didn't even ask for a kid in my school, okay? I said, oh my God, God is with me, okay? This was my sign from the universe. And then I said, okay, well, how will I get in touch with you? I said to her. And we were talking, and I said, listen, I only want to have a 1-to-6 student ratio. I don't want to have a lot of kids because it's very hands-on. And you understand that when it's a very hands-on program, if you have too many kids, you can't really focus on them if there are too many. And she says, you know, I really want you to meet my mother. And I said, who's your mother? And she's from Denver. So I understood Silva. And we have like 349 families living here. Out of that, 147 are religious. And there was no Silva. Okay, but she's from Denver, and she really said Sova. I knew Sova, but not Silva. So instead of going to pick my husband up from synagogue, I went with her to her mother. Okay? And we had this whole discussion. I was like talking about being inspired. Here's this lady giving me all this advice on how I should open up this thing, because she's thinking that her grandson, okay, is going to be part of it. And I didn't even ask this woman to send her kid. And she's already having all these friends, and they can't find a play group. And I said, listen, I'm only accepting 6. That's it. Not doing more than that.
Isn't that amazing, Margaret? Isn't that amazing when you notice that if sometimes it feels like life's conspiring with you, you know, that if you just can be there and be receptive to the opportunity. You knew in that moment was not the time to go pick up your husband from the synagogue. The time was to go have the conversation with this woman's mom, and you knew to follow that, and that's wonderful.
Totally, that's I'm sharing.
And man, if I'm not careful, I just complicate the moment so much that I'll miss those opportunities. You know. Serendipity is a thing, and it's about being receptive to it. I just lost my train of thought. Linda, you said something once that stayed with me, but now it's gone again, so I can't refer to it. But it's the thing about receptivity to change, or listening to that inner guidance stuff. I don't know why I wrote this down about a half an hour ago. I wrote down even this, even this, even this. So that's my Jewish heart coming up in my poetic way of saying that I have sometimes some really profound and difficult surrenders in my life. I'm a dancer, and I've been on the bench for so long, it's really painful. I just miss dancing so much. I think I've been twice in the last year, and I live in, there are no Lindy Hoppers and blues dancers where I even live. So if I want to go dancing, I have to schlep, and I have to go, and I have to feel well enough to do it, and I don't. So there was some local swing band was going to play at an art opening, and my body was feeling well enough that I drove myself there, and some lesbian dancers were going to be going. I saw that on Meetup. So I figured I'd get a couple of dances in, and I went dancing to a crappy band and bad dancers, but I got 3 dances in, 3 dances, 10 minutes where I got to move to the music and follow a lead or lead a follow and be in that magic. And then my niece said, go home, and I went home. And you know what? It was great. It was great. It was worth every second of the effort it took me to drive a half hour, to dance for 10 minutes, to drive home again, because I got to move to music, and I didn't have to thingify it. I didn't have to make it mean anything besides that 10-minute gift to myself. And because whether it be Parkinson's, Linda, or maybe this is going to be the last day I ever straighten up again, there's grace in that, and there's power in that, and there's some kind of way to creatively express myself. I think there's got to be something. Because like my mother used to say, I haven't been brought this far to be dropped on my head. I don't think. Not now. That would be really weird. That would be really fucking weird. So, yeah.
Well, it's fascinating to think, we're creating from the moment that we're born until the moment we flatline. And, the question could be, well, how is someone who's dying creating? Well, they're thinking. They're thinking, and they're moving through that experience via their thinking. And even, I have seen some of the most beautiful experiences of my life at the moment of death, and the way people move through that transition with grace and elegance and dignity and love. They're creating. And I was struck by, Margaret, when you were talking that, things in your life aren't different. There's some things in your life that are not different. Your son is still under this contempt order. Your husband is still struggling with money things. There's this and there's that. And yet there's this excitement in you. There's this potential in you that is saying, there's something here I could create. And there's something here that when I think about it, it feels good and it feels right and it feels helpful. And when I put it out there, I'm getting feedback from the universe that there's something here. There's something here worth following. I think what often happens when people are creating in that way, and I know I've experienced this, then you stumble across what seems like an obstacle. Or then it feels like the flow gets a little bit tougher. There's something that you've got to address in order to go any farther. And it's at that point that a lot of people give up. And they'll say, there's this creative energy behind the universe. If it's creating through me, how come I ran into an obstacle? Or how come the flow seems to have stopped? Or how come this didn't seem to work out? But that's when I think we're most called on to look at ourselves as creator. That I understand I wasn't at the Manhattan Beach conference, but Bill, my husband, came back and he talked about how Elsie Spittle was talking about responsibility. Mm-hmm. Responsibility. That's one of the things that understanding the three principles helps us see the power that we are to respond to everything, and to respond to everything in a creative way. And it's those people who keep showing up in the moment, responding to everything in a creative way, who I think reap the rewards. I remember when I started doing that creativity work with women, it was nice. There were these groups of 8 women who were coming together every 12 weeks. And I wanted to kind of take that a little farther. And I put a couple of different programs out there that fell flat on their faces. But then I had this creative inspiration. It was 2003. Came to me like in November. What if I did a program called Mystical Magical Me in 2003? What if I did a retreat with that name? And I had all kinds of thoughts about that. Oh, well, no one would come to that because it's kind of, people don't like the term mystical, and it's kind of like whimsical. But something in me just said, what the hell? These programs aren't going anyway. Not every program I'm putting out there anyway is going. Why not try this one? And that was the one that hit. That was the one that got me the full spread page in a newspaper and a full 4-color display and actually, interestingly, that was what opened up my creativity programs to men and women. And that really seemed to open up a completely different flow. Well, if I had used my paintbrush to say, well, I failed, and there are too many programs that I put out there that didn't go, and, you know, I'm not on to anything here, that's where it would have ended. That's what I would have created, a dead end. But just kind of saying with my paintbrush, you never know, what the heck. There's something in this that feels really kind of cool. I'm just going to put it out there. And following that just sort of inspiration and trust grew that group of women and men from a circle initially of 8 women to a circle of over 300 who were on my, and this was before the internet, so there wasn't social media to promote these things. These things were being promoted by advertisements in a local newspaper and by word of mouth and by the publicity that I got, you know. And to have a circle of 300 people who keep showing up to do your programs is pretty good. And then that spawned, I was really interested in holistic medicine. So a subset of 8 people came together and we started creating clinics around the state of West Virginia for people to come and sample healing arts. They were called the Healing Arts Clinics. And that spawned another big group of circle of people who got together and were supporting each other. And the thing about it that I think back on is it wasn't easy. And there were a lot of dead ends along the way. But it was accompanied by a flow of ease. It was accompanied by a flow of relationship. And that's what I liked, Margaret, about your example, was that talking to the real estate person opened a conversation. It opened a relationship, opened another relationship. And it was in the context of relationships with people, for me, that a lot of these ideas just started to develop traction. The same thing with the Life is Spiritual Theater program. I think the most beautiful thing that's come out of it is a relationship. Relationships with people who are sharing an understanding that are, you know, is opening their lives to new levels and helping them move beyond the limitations that they impose on themselves. I don't know, when we get out of our own way and just know that we are creative energy, and know that when things don't work out, it doesn't mean that we did something wrong, or that there wasn't any flow there, or it could mean anything. It could mean that the timing wasn't right. It could mean that we have to alter the focus a little bit. You know, it could mean anything. But it's our trust and our faith in the creative power that we are, and staying with it and giving that time and attention that in the end makes a difference. Bill and I talk about how there was a point where we decided, we were living in Michigan. We talk about how we were having this thought about, we want to move closer to our children and grandchildren. And that would mean setting up some way to be with northern grandchildren who live up in Minnesota and southern grandchildren who live in Phoenix. Well, that's kind of a tall order. And we were in Michigan. And we came down to Phoenix, and all we did, it's kind of like your story, Margaret, all we did was we set up an interview with a real estate agent. We said, okay, one of the first things we need to know is how much does it cost to live in Phoenix, and what are our options? That's it. And so we met with this realtor, and she took us to 5 or 6 places. And the really funny thing was that by the end of that weekend, we had rented a furnished condo to start in June. This was in February. We were like, oh my God, what did we do? We plucked down a deposit and we rented this condo in Phoenix. That means that somehow between now in February and June 1st, we got to figure out how to move to Phoenix. And along the way, we said, well, but we also wanted to live in Minnesota. Well, we weren't sure how that was going to happen, but we literally moved half of our belongings to Minnesota and half to Phoenix. And that 6 months was not easy. It was not easy to pack up a house, separate our belongings, get licenses in a new direction, make arrangements, find the money to do all that. It wasn't easy, but it did unfold with ease. It did unfold with ease because we kept putting our ear to that place inside of us where the formless is taking form and saying, well, what do we see to do? 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 And here we are a year and a half later, actually a year and 3/4 later, it'll be 2 years in June. And we have a lovely home in Phoenix. And we have a lovely apartment in our son's home in Minnesota where we can go to spend summers. And we are perfectly set up the way we want it to be. Now, that vision did not unfold in an instant. We just didn't suddenly see this was how we were going to do it. It unfolded step by step. It unfolded by continually putting our ear to that portal inside of ourselves where creativity is coming through and saying, oh yeah, we could do that. We could do that. We could do that. And in fact, it was really funny with the Minnesota apartment. We had kind of gotten clear about how much it was going to cost to live in Minnesota, and it turned out that the place that our son and his wife lived in Minnesota actually is a little expensive. And we were surprised at the degree that the money it was going to cost to try to come up with some way to live up there. And one day I started to think, people are living in these things called tiny houses, and an article crossed my desk on tiny houses, and I was curious about that. And we were also looking at houses in Phoenix, and we saw that a lot of houses in Phoenix had casitas that they rented out. And suddenly I said to my husband, what if we bought a small farm up in Minnesota and rented it out and just built a little casita on the farm, a little tiny house on the farm that we could live in while we were up there in the summers. And so we floated that idea with our son and his wife, and our daughter-in-law said, we've actually had thoughts about that. We've actually had thoughts about what if you built a little casita on our property? And then they said, but then we also realized that they had 2 sets of twins, and in less than 2 years. And they had an architect draw up a remodel of their house in order to enlarge it to accommodate 2 sets of twins. But along the way, they also had the architect design a little apartment in the basement. And their thought was, when the kids get to be teenagers, we'll have this other little space for them to use. And they looked at us and they said, what if you built out the apartment in our basement and you used it for the place for you to live in the summer? And so that's what we did. And we're still sort of finishing that up, the last details of that. But the point of that story is we didn't see the end result. We just kept putting our ear toward that place inside of ourselves that is creating and saying, what about this? What about that? What about this? And having conversation. And out of that was created a beautiful resolution of the initial desire to want to live in 2 places so that we could be with 2 different sets of grandchildren.
Oh, I really love that, Linda. Thank you, because my last move was just over 2 years ago, and it wasn't easy, nor was it in response to something I wanted. It was, I felt like I had to move. I ran out of house. I had to move. And I feel like I had a hard time dealing with that. I think I've called it a breakdown because I don't really have language for it, but I feel like it was a really hard couple of years for me. And I'm starting to fan the sparks of the embers of my inner guidance as to my next home, because I am not clear about that. And I'm on a ton of waiting lists for senior housing, and every time I see one of those places, I have a strong feeling I would not survive, I would not thrive in them. And I don't know where I'm going to end up. And so I'm just, all I know to do is just know that it's okay not to know, but to not try and put out the flames of the embers that may eventually be able to help me point in the direction of my next, hopefully not too many more moves. I feel like I'd like to find one that could be a forever move, and I don't know. I have no idea what that would look like. I want to also own something that I said a few minutes ago, because I realized I was putting conditions on my aging. I said something like, well, as long as there's some way for me to creatively express myself. And, listening to the conversation after I said that, I realized that, well, maybe that won't always be the case. Maybe who knows what will happen to my body, and maybe I won't even be able to express myself. I don't hope to have a long, lingering part of my life where I'm not really involved or active or present, but who knows? So even this, right? Whatever the depths of the surrender I get to have, there's some reason for it, and I have to say, it's pretty lovely to not think the reason is something bad about me, whatever it may be, even if it's completely incomprehensible sometimes. I can even feel lucky. I can feel lucky.
I think that's what you just said is really beautiful, that so often it is the feeling. It is the feeling that we bring to something that is everything.
Well, the three principles conversation, I mean, my head nearly exploded in your class last year, Linda, because just look for the nice feeling. If I had heard that one more time, I really do think my head was going to explode, because I couldn't see one no matter where I looked until I did. And I did not engineer that. I could not technique myself or strategize myself or practice myself into a nice feeling. It just wasn't in the card. That's not my way. I have too much going on in my own psychology. I couldn't do that. Eventually, though, I started hearing more, I guess, because I only had to hear somebody like Dick and Bettinger in my ears saying over and over again, the sun's still shining, even if you can only see the clouds, honey, it's still there. And I would take these walks and plug those words into my ears and listen, and eventually felt the sunshine. Yeah. And I, when you really want it enough, then you can start to identify and recognize those moments of good feeling. So I couldn't actively look for the good feeling. I just had to learn to recognize it, I think.
And what, I think sometimes for me, and listening to you, Sue, it's like, what feeling are we referring to? And it's not necessarily the feelings that we relate to when we think of the word feeling. You know, it's not necessarily this feeling of joy or happiness or
Pleasure.
pleasure. It's a knowing. It's a openness, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, remember when Bill and I were first looking at the, you know how when you're looking at a house for houses, you look at these little, you look at these real estate websites and you can look through the pictures of houses. And I was using the Redfin app actually, and I was scoping out different houses in Phoenix, and we had looked at a lot of them and in a certain price range, and you know, just said, no, you know, we're just not going there. We're just not going there. We're just not going there. Nothing we could find really fit what we wanted. And I suddenly was just scrolling through, and I saw the house we're in right now, but it was way outside of our price range. And my first thought was, oh, that house, there's something there. And what was really funny about it was that I kept looking at a picture of the kitchen, and the kitchen and the house was done in kind of a bright, a lot of the walls were painted kind of a bright citrine green. It was beautifully done, but not my color scheme. And so I kept having this sort of funny, like, ugh, not for me. There's something here. There's something here. And I can't tell you how many times I came back to that house, probably 20, where I'd go and I'd look, and then I'd come back and I'd think, too expensive, would need some work. There's something here. And finally, I took a risk and I said to Bill, I said, honey, there's this house I keep looking at, and it's out of our price range, and it doesn't look like a Linda house, but there's something here. Now, I don't know how to describe that knowing. I don't know how, it was a feeling, but I don't quite know how to put words on it. And Bill said to me, oh, let's go drive by it. I'm kind of attracted to the outside of it. And so we got in our car and he drove by it, and there's his first look at it. He said, this is our house. I know it. This is our house. And it was our house. And along the way, we had to, there were moments when I lost faith because we had to engineer all kinds of things for it to come to pass. It wasn't necessarily easy, but we were following a feeling. We were following a feeling of there's something here. Hang with it. And it all fell into place. And there were things that came to pass that supported it that we could not have predicted it. Well, that's been the story of my life. I'm here to suggest, I'm sure it's been the story of your lives too. That there have been times when you have just followed a feeling.
Well, that's what this is. That's what simplicity is. That's what simplify your life is. It's just like, yeah, let's just do this. But I don't have that about where I'm gonna end up next. I don't even have the first glimmer of it yet. What I do have is patience.
Yeah.
What I do have is patience and a respect for knowing that even though I don't know the how or even the what, doesn't diminish the desire, you know, or the clarity of my desire, even if I don't have any clarity on the how or the what. So.
Yeah, and when I'm in that place, Sue, I tend to kind of like, I guess I adopt a mode of experimentation. Okay, I don't know where this is going to end, but I'm willing to experiment. I'm willing to show up. I'm willing to stay open, and I do what I call it is piloting. So when Bill and I came to Phoenix, we piloted the idea in our heads that maybe we wanted to live in a condo. And so we went and looked at a lot of condos.
Oh, I see.
And we even piloted living in the condo. We lived in one, for a furnished one, for 6 months to give us time to get to know Phoenix neighborhoods. And we loved it. We enjoyed it. But both of us came out of it with this sort of sense of, no, not yet, not right now. And we ended up moving in another direction. But as I look back on it, I give us a lot of credit for piloting, for surrendering to some experimentation and just watching where the flow went from the experimentation. And I love that about you, Sue. I've seen that in you, even with this housing thing or with Simplicity, that you're open to experimenting. You're open to putting things out there. You're opening to following flow. You're opening to see where that leads you.
And I don't know, we're not going to go much longer, but I think it's interesting to look at. I might bring this up in a further simplify your thinking conversation, but I think that the addiction paradigm has something to do with it too. Because as somebody with addiction in my life, I am seeing that being willing to let go of the way I see myself and my place in my life has taken a fair amount of prying my cold dead fingers off of the idea that I'm whatever this set of negative attributes that I've described myself as for so many decades, and letting go of that. 28 years of 12-step meetings didn't change that, a lot of self-improvement work, a lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, a lot of ritual, a lot of burning, a lot of shredding, a lot of wishing, a lot of affirming, to be able to make that choice in any given moment to step into the light is now that it is no longer a struggle, it's hard to describe how significant a struggle that was. It's just hard, especially if you're not a hope to die dope fiend. It is really hard to describe how much investment there is in building that kind of a persona and a life and an identity. And to be where I am now is a massive gift that comes with a whole lot of other juicy payments and consequences that go with it, because you don't treat yourself heedless of your own safety and that of others for a long time, and then, have an easy breezy old age. So instead I get to have this juicy, delightful old age, and people who are happy to join in the conversation with me. And for that, I'm super duper grateful.
And you know what? So if I could share this quote from Sid, I think it points to something that we haven't touched on real clearly, but I think is in the thread of the conversation. So in his book, In Quest of the Pearl, on page 57, there is this quote that I love. And Sid wrote this book set in Hawaii. So he's using the language of the Hawaiian culture. And so he says aloha. So aloha means the light within, the light and the love within. Aloha is a way of life. I think that's really interesting. The light and the love within is a way of life. Knowing intuitively what to do and when to do it. Giving without thought of return or fear of need, with great faith in the abundance of life. So, Sue, when you're out giving this program and and giving away yourself to people. There's a flow. When Bill and I were in Phoenix giving, it's interesting that we gave a lot in relationship. We had these beautiful relationships with realtors, and just gave a lot of our love and our humor and our support, and they gave back. And they helped us find our way through this journey. Margaret, you talked about giving in a conversation with that realtor, just giving of your ideas, giving of your hopes and dreams. And that led to, what about this, or what about that, or could I link you with this person or that person? It's the giving that is key. Aloha is a way of life, knowing intuitively what to do and when to do it, giving without thought of return or fear of need, with great faith in the abundance of life. That's the essence of our creativity, isn't it? Giving of our creative self in big ways and small ways. Even Sue, I was thinking about your comment earlier about how this morning, you're putting together potions and herbal, concoctions and things that you can give to others, and you have a life moment, right, where the oil spills over, and that's such a beautiful metaphor in such a way that happens to all of us, but to just patiently wipe it up and keep giving.
Wow. Thank you. I'm glad you read that. I haven't read that book. That's beautiful. I love that.
It's a very powerful, very, very powerful book.
So we are nearly at time. I want to thank you, Linda, for joining me today. And if you'd like to let Terry and Margaret know how they can find you, that would be terrific. And you want to do that?
Sure. We have a website I have a website that I share with my husband called www.thedoctorspettit.com, THEDRSPETTIT.com, and there's an event page on that website that lists all the things we're doing, and a work with us page that shows all the different ways of connecting with us. So glad I got a chance to meet you, two very creative women, and of course I know that Sue is very, very creative. So thank you for the opportunity, Sue.
Thank you. And Margaret, I know I have one on Thursday with Karen DeMarco. Terry, I want to tell you also Simplify Your Health, and that one is Thursday morning. And if you'd like to stay connected, Margaret, give me your email address in a message somehow, and I will put you on my mailing list so that you can get notices about these upcoming calls. And who knows, maybe even a small group coaching program that comes out of this at some point.
Yes. So yes, I mean, I try to message you through Messenger. So if you want, I could, because I got your name from the CTI group. So if you want, I could just do it there.
Yeah, I will look for it in my messages, because I don't know if we're friends on Facebook, but I'll look for it.
Because I didn't take you as a friend. I just, whatever.
I will look for you, Margaret. I will look. Yes.
Okay.
And
fine.
thank you all very much. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.